The rain struck Warren Lockhart's face like ice-cold needles, and he had to squint through the downpour just to make out the narrow road ahead. His horse whinnied nervously beneath him, hooves slipping on mud that had turned the path into a treacherous ribbon of slick earth. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the forest around him in stark white flashes, and thunder followed so close behind that he felt it in his chest. He should have left the village an hour earlier, should have seen the storm clouds gathering over the mountains, but old Marcus had insisted on one more round of ale to celebrate the sale of Warren's wheat crop, and Warren had been too pleased with the coin in his saddlebag to refuse. Now that coin felt like poor compensation for the risk of breaking his neck on this God-forsaken road. Another flash of lightning revealed a shape ahead, a dark structure set back from the path. Warren urged his mount forward, hoping it might be a barn or shelter, somewhere to wait out the worst of the storm. As they drew closer, he realized it was a small cottage, stone built with a thatched roof that looked sturdy despite the battering wind. Smoke rose from the chimney, barely visible through the sheets of rain. Someone was home. Warren guided his horse up to the cottage and dismounted, his boots sinking into mud. He was soaked through, his traveling cloak doing nothing to keep out the relentless rain. He tied his horse to a post under a small overhang where at least the animal would have some protection, then approached the door and knocked. The wood was thick and solid under his knuckles, the sound barely audible over the storm. For a long moment, nothing happened. Warren knocked again, harder this time, and called out, "Hello, I am sorry to disturb you, but the storm caught me on the road. Might I shelter here until it passes?" He heard movement inside, footsteps approaching. The door opened a crack and Warren found himself looking at a woman, an orc woman. Her skin was the deep green of summer leaves, and two small tusks curved up from her lower jaw. Dark hair, damp from the humidity, was pulled back from her face, and her amber eyes studied him with obvious wariness. She was shorter than he expected, perhaps only a few inches below his own 6 feet, with a build that was strong but unmistakably feminine. Warren had seen orcs before, of course. There were a few who lived on the frontier, keeping mostly to themselves, trading occasionally in the villages. But he had never been this close to one, had never really looked at one as anything more than a curiosity. Now, standing on her doorstep soaked and desperate, he found himself trying to read her expression, wondering if she would turn him away. "Please," he said, trying to keep his voice steady despite his chattering teeth. "I am no threat to you, I just need to get out of this storm. My horse too, if you have space." The orc woman's eyes moved past him to his horse, then back to his face. She seemed to be weighing something, her hand tight on the edge of the door. When she spoke, her voice was low and careful, with a slight roughness that he found oddly pleasant. "You are from Millbrook, a few miles west of there. I have a farm near the river." She nodded slowly, as if this information satisfied some requirement. Then she opened the door wider and stepped back. "There is a shed behind the cottage. You can put your horse there out of the weather. Then come inside and dry off." Relief flooded through Warren. "Thank you. Truly thank you." He hurried back to his horse, untied the reins, and led the animal around the side of the cottage. The shed was small but well maintained, with fresh straw on the floor and a few hooks on the wall for tack. Warren unsaddled his horse quickly, rubbing the animal down with a relatively dry section of his cloak before settling it with some of the hay he found in the corner. By the time he made it back to the cottage door, he was shivering so hard he could barely control his hands. The orc woman let him in without a word, closing the door firmly behind him and dropping a wooden bar across it to hold it shut against the wind. The interior of the cottage was warm and surprisingly cozy. A fire burned in the stone hearth, and the main room was furnished simply but comfortably, with a wooden table, 2 chairs, a shelf of books, and a sleeping area cordoned off by a curtain in the far corner. The smell of cooking filled the air, something savory that made Warren's stomach clench with sudden hunger. "Take off your cloak," the orc woman said, gesturing to a peg by the door, "and your boots. You are dripping all over my floor." Warren obeyed, fumbling with the clasp of his cloak with numb fingers. He hung it on the peg, pulled off his boots, and stood there in his stocking feet, still dripping but at least no longer adding to the puddle around the door. The orc woman brought him a rough spun towel, and he took it gratefully, pressing it to his face and hair. "Sit by the fire," she said. "You are half frozen." Warren moved to the hearth and sank into one of the chairs, holding his hands out to the flames. The warmth was almost painful at first, but gradually his shivering began to subside. The orc woman moved around the room behind him, and he heard the clink of pottery, the sound of liquid being poured. A moment later she set a mug in his hands. "Drink," she said. "It will help." He raised the mug to his lips and tasted hot cider, spiced with cinnamon and something else he could not quite identify. It spread warmth through his chest and belly, and he drank deeply, feeling the tension in his muscles begin to ease. "Thank you," he said again, looking up at her. "I am Warren." "Warren Lockhart." The orc woman hesitated, then nodded. Wren Stonebrook." "Well met, Wren, and I am sorry for the intrusion. I should have been more careful about the weather." "The storm came up fast," Wren said, moving back to the hearth. She ladled something from a pot hanging over the fire into a wooden bowl. "You could not have known. Are you hungry?" "Starving, if I am honest." She filled a second bowl and brought them both to the table, along with a loaf of dark bread and a small crock of butter. Warren stood and joined her, his legs still a bit unsteady but improving. The stew was thick with vegetables and chunks of rabbit meat, and the first bite tasted like the finest meal he had eaten in weeks. They ate in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the relentless drumming of rain on the roof. Warren found himself stealing glances at Wren as they ate. She held her spoon with careful precision, her movements economical and controlled. Her face was expressive despite the tusks, which somehow only added to rather than detracted from her features. There was a sadness in her eyes, he thought, or maybe just loneliness. She lived out here by herself, that much was clear. He wondered why. "This is excellent," he said, breaking the silence. "Did you make the bread yourself?" "I did. I bake every few days." "It is better than anything I can manage. I usually end up with something that tastes like charcoal and has the texture of a brick." The corner of Wren's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Baking takes practice and patience. 2 things I am short on, apparently." Warren mopped up the last of his stew with a piece of bread. "How long have you lived here?" Wren's expression closed off slightly. 2 years. "Do you farm?" "Raise animals, a garden, some chickens. I trade herbs and remedies with the villages." "You are a healer, of sorts. I know plants, what they can do." Warren nodded, filing that information away. There were few healers on the frontier, and most of what they knew came from tradition and guesswork. Someone with real knowledge of herbs would be valuable. "That is a useful skill. It keeps me fed." Wren stood and collected their empty bowls. "The storm shows no sign of stopping." "You should stay the night." The words were matter of fact, but Warren felt the weight of them. Staying the night in the home of an unmarried woman, even an orc woman, was the sort of thing that could set tongues wagging if anyone found out. But the alternative was going back out into that storm, and he was not fool enough to risk it. "Are you sure? I do not want to impose." "You already imposed when you knocked on my door," Wren said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "But you may as well stay now." The road will be even worse by morning, but at least you will be dry and rested." "Then I accept. Thank you." Warren watched as she moved to a chest in the corner and pulled out a folded blanket. "I can sleep by the fire. I will not trouble you for more than that. The fire is the warmest place. I will not have you catching your death after I went to the trouble of feeding you." She handed him the blanket. "I will be behind the curtain if you need anything." Warren took the blanket, their fingers brushing for a moment. Wren pulled her hand back quickly, as if the contact had burned her. She turned away, moving to the curtained area without another word. Warren settled himself in the chair by the fire, wrapping the blanket around his shoulders. It smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. Outside, the storm raged on. Lightning flickered through the gaps around the shutters, and the wind howled like something alive and angry. But inside the cottage, it was warm and safe, and Warren found his eyes growing heavy despite the strangeness of the situation. He listened to the small sounds of Wren preparing for bed behind the curtain, the rustle of fabric, the creak of rope supports as she settled onto her mattress. "Wren," he called softly. "Yes. Why did you let me in? You do not know me. I could have been anyone." There was a long pause. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, almost lost beneath the sound of the rain. "Because no one should be out in a storm like this, not if there is a choice." Warren thought about that, about what it meant that she had opened her door to a stranger despite the obvious risk, despite whatever wariness she felt toward humans. He wanted to say something more, to thank her again or tell her he understood, but the words would not come. Instead, he closed his eyes and let the warmth of the fire lull him toward sleep. He dreamed of green eyes and the smell of lavender. When Warren woke, pale morning light was filtering through the shutters, and the sound of the storm had been replaced by the steady drip of water from the eaves. His neck was stiff from sleeping in the chair, and his clothes, though dry, were still uncomfortable from the previous night's soaking. He stretched carefully, working out the kinks in his shoulders, and looked around the cottage. The curtain was pulled back, and Wren's sleeping area was empty, the blankets neatly folded. He could hear movement outside, and after pulling on his boots, which had dried by the fire overnight, he opened the door and stepped out into the morning. The world looked freshly washed, the colors of the forest more vivid than before. Puddles dotted the yard, and the garden beside the cottage was a bit battered but still standing. Wren was at the shed, feeding his horse a handful of oats from a bucket. She looked up as he approached, and he noticed that her hair was unbound now, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. "Good morning," he said. "I hope I did not sleep too long enough. The road should be passable now, though you will want to watch for washouts." She patted his horse's neck, and the animal whickered contentedly. "I gave him some water and oats. He seems sound. Thanks to you." Warren moved closer, inspecting his horse for any signs of injury or strain from the previous night. Everything looked fine. "I should get going. I have already taken up too much of your time." "It was no trouble." Warren hesitated, not quite ready to leave yet but unsure what else to say. In the daylight, Wren looked different. Less guarded, perhaps, or maybe it was just that he could see her more clearly. Her skin was marked with a few small scars, thin white lines that stood out against the green. One ran along her jaw, another across her forearm. She wore a simple dress of homespun wool, belted at the waist, and her feet were bare despite the cool morning air. "You get many visitors out here?" he asked. Wren shook her head. "You are the first in months. Most people avoid this road if they know an orc lives here." "That seems foolish. You saved my life last night, or at least saved me from a very unpleasant experience. Fear is not logical." Wren's voice was neutral, but Warren heard the resignation in it, the acceptance of something she had long since stopped fighting. People see tusks and green skin and they think monster. It does not matter what I do or say." Warren wanted to argue, to tell her that not everyone thought that way, but he knew it would ring false. He had seen the way people in the villages talked about orcs, the casual contempt and suspicion. He had never questioned it before, had simply accepted it as the way things were. Now, standing in front of this woman who had shown him nothing but kindness, it felt wrong. "For what it is worth," he said quietly, "I do not think you are a monster." Wren looked at him for a long moment, her amber eyes searching his face. Then she gave a small nod. "That is worth something." Warren saddled his horse, working slowly to give himself more time. He did not want to leave, he realized. The cottage felt peaceful in a way his own farm never did, and Wren's presence was calming despite his initial nervousness. Or maybe because of it. There was something about the way she moved, the quiet competence in everything she did that drew him in. When he finally led his horse out into the yard, Wren was waiting by the door. She handed him a small cloth-wrapped bundle. "For the road, bread and cheese. You do not have to, I know. Take it anyway." Warren tucked the bundle into his saddlebag, then mounted up. From horseback he could look down at her, but somehow she did not seem smaller. If anything, she looked more solid, more real than anything else around him. "If I am ever on this road again," he said, "may I stop by? I could bring you something from the village, flour maybe, or sugar." Wren's expression softened slightly. "You do not owe me anything. I know, but I would like to, if you would not mind." "I would not mind." Warren smiled, surprised by how much her answer pleased him. He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and turned his horse toward the road. As he rode away, he glanced back once and saw Wren still standing in the doorway, watching him go. He raised a hand in a wave, and after a moment, she raised hers in return. The road home was muddy and treacherous, just as Wren had warned, but Warren barely noticed. His mind was full of amber eyes and the memory of a voice saying, "Because no one should be out in a storm like this." 3 weeks passed before Warren found an excuse to return to Wren's cottage. He told himself he was just being neighborly, that it was the proper thing to do after she had shown him such hospitality. But in truth, he had been thinking about her almost constantly since that night. He found himself wondering what she was doing, whether she was lonely out there by herself, whether she ever thought about him. He finally settled on bringing her a small sack of white flour, which was expensive on the frontier, and a jar of honey from the hives he kept at the edge of his property. Practical gifts, the kind one neighbor might give another. Nothing that could be misinterpreted. The ride to her cottage took most of the morning, but the weather was fine, and Warren enjoyed the journey. The forest was alive with birdsong, and wildflowers bloomed in the clearings. When he finally reached the familiar stone cottage, he felt his heart beating faster, a nervousness he had not experienced since he was a boy courting his first sweetheart. Wren was in her garden when he arrived, pulling weeds from between rows of herbs. She looked up at the sound of his horse, and Warren saw surprise cross her face, followed by something that might have been pleasure. "Warren," she said, standing and brushing dirt from her hands, "I did not expect to see you again. I told you I would come back." He dismounted and retrieved the flour and honey from his saddlebag. "I brought these for you. I thought you might be able to use them." Wren took the gifts, her eyes widening slightly when she felt the weight of the flour sack. "This is too much. It is a thank you for saving me from the storm." "I did not save you, I just gave you shelter. Same thing in my book." Warren gestured to the garden. "Your plants look healthy. What are you growing?" Wren seemed to relax a little, the tension leaving her shoulders. "Comfrey, feverfew, St. John's wort, chamomile, some others. I was just weeding the mint before it takes over everything. Mint is like that. I tried growing some once and ended up with half my field covered in it. Warren stepped closer, genuinely curious. "How did you learn about all these plants?" "My mother taught me. She was a healer in our clan." Wren knelt back down and resumed pulling weeds, and after a moment, Warren joined her. "When I was young, I would follow her into the forest, and she would show me which plants to gather, when to harvest them, how to prepare them. I learned more from her than I ever could from a book." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." She was. The past tense hung heavy in the air, and Warren did not press further. Instead, they worked together in comfortable silence, clearing the weeds from around the delicate herb plants. Warren found it pleasant, the simple physical work and the quiet company. Wren's hands moved with practiced efficiency, and occasionally she would point out a particular plant and tell him what it was used for. "This one is good for headaches," she said, touching the leaves of the feverfew. "And this one helps with sleep." Her fingers brushed the chamomile. "I make tea from it when the nights are difficult." "Do you have many difficult nights?" Wren glanced at him, then back at the plants. "Some. It is quiet out here, sometimes too quiet." Warren understood that feeling. His own farm could feel isolating, especially in the winter months when the snow kept him trapped indoors for days at a time. But at least he had the option of riding into town, of visiting the tavern or attending church on Sundays. Wren did not have that. She had chosen to live apart, or maybe had been forced to, and now she was stuck with that choice. "You could come to Millbrook," he said impulsively. "There is a market every Saturday. You could sell your remedies there, meet people." Wren's expression went carefully blank. "I do not think that would be welcome." "Why not? People need healers. If they knew what you could do, they would see an orc trying to sell them potions and assume I was trying to poison them." Wren's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "I have been to market towns before, Warren. I know how it goes." Warren wanted to argue, to insist that she was wrong, but he knew she was not. He had seen how people reacted to the few orcs who ventured into Millbrook. The suspicious stares, the whispered comments, the way merchants would suddenly claim their goods were not for sale. It was ugly, and it was unfair, and it was the world they lived in. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "That must be hard." Wren shrugged, but he could see the hurt beneath the gesture. "It is what it is. I manage." They finished weeding in silence, and when they were done, Wren invited him inside for lunch. She served cold chicken and fresh bread, along with a salad made from greens from her garden. They ate at the small table, and Warren found himself relaxing into the rhythm of conversation. Wren asked about his farm, and he told her about the wheat crop he was planning, the repairs his barn needed, the problems he was having with foxes getting into his chicken coop. "You need better fencing," Wren said, "and maybe some scent deterrents. I can make you something if you like." "Foxes hate certain smells." "That would be wonderful. I have lost 3 chickens this month alone. Bring me a piece of cloth from your coop next time you visit, something with the scent of the chickens on it. I will prepare a mixture you can spread around the perimeter." "Next time." Warren felt his pulse quicken. "So I am welcome to visit again." Wren met his eyes, and he saw warmth there mixed with caution. "You are welcome. If you want to come." "I want to come," Warren said, and meant it more than he had meant anything in a long time. He stayed through the afternoon, helping Wren with various tasks around the cottage. They repaired a section of fence that had been damaged in the storm, hauled water from the well, and gathered eggs from her chickens, which were scrawnier than his own but seemed content enough. It was simple work, but Warren enjoyed it. There was something satisfying about working alongside Wren, falling into an easy partnership where words were not always necessary. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Warren knew he needed to leave if he was going to make it home before dark. Wren walked him to his horse, and he found himself reluctant to mount up, searching for an excuse to linger just a little longer. "Thank you for the flour and honey," Wren said. "It was generous. Thank you for letting me help today. I enjoyed it." "So did I." They stood there, neither quite willing to be the first to turn away. Warren was acutely aware of how close Wren was standing, close enough that he could see the faint freckles scattered across her nose, the way the evening light turned her skin to deep jade. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the conventional way, perhaps, but beautiful nonetheless. "I will come back in a week," he said, "with that cloth from the chicken coop. I will be here." Warren mounted his horse, gave Wren a final wave, and rode away. As the cottage disappeared behind the trees, he found himself already counting the days until he could return. Summer deepened into full bloom, and Warren found reasons to visit Wren's cottage almost every week. Sometimes he brought gifts, practical things like nails or lamp oil. Other times he simply showed up with nothing but the excuse that he was passing through. Wren never turned him away. Instead, she seemed to welcome his visits, to look forward to them as much as he did. They fell into a pattern. Warren would arrive in the late morning, and they would work together on whatever projects Wren had, tending the garden, gathering herbs in the forest, making repairs to the cottage. Then they would share a meal and talk, conversations that ranged from the mundane to the profound. Wren told him about her childhood in an orc clan far to the north, about the traditions and customs of her people, about the war that had scattered the clans and forced many orcs into human lands. Warren told her about his own past, about growing up on a farm much like the one he owned now, about losing his parents to fever when he was barely 20, about the lonely years since then. With each visit, Warren felt himself drawn deeper. It was not just attraction, though he felt that too, a growing awareness of Wren as a woman and not just a friend. It was the way she listened when he spoke, really listened, as if his words mattered. It was her quiet competence, the way she moved through the world with purpose and grace. It was her kindness, which extended not just to him but to everything around her, the chickens she hand-fed, the plants she tended with such care, the injured birds she nursed back to health. One hot afternoon in midsummer, they were walking through the forest together, gathering wild berries for preserves. Warren carried the basket while Wren examined each bush carefully before picking. The air was thick with humidity, and the sound of insects filled the spaces between their words. "Tell me something," Warren said, watching as Wren plucked a particularly fat blackberry from a thorny vine. "If you could do anything, go anywhere, what would it be?" Wren paused, the berry halfway to the basket. "That is a strange question. I am curious. You seem content here, but I wonder if you ever wish for something different." Wren dropped the berry into the basket and moved to the next bush. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "I used to wish for a lot of things, to go back to my clan, to be somewhere I was not looked at like a threat. To have a family." She shook her head. "But wishing does not change anything. This is my life and it is a good one. I have what I need." "But not everything you want, does anyone?" Warren thought about that. His own list of wants had been simple for so long: a successful farm, enough money to be comfortable, maybe a wife someday, though that seemed increasingly unlikely as the years passed and he remained alone. But lately, his wants had shifted. Now, what he wanted most was to be here in this forest with Wren. "I think," he said carefully, "that sometimes we find what we want in unexpected places." Wren looked at him, her amber eyes questioning. "What are you saying, Warren?" "I am saying that I enjoy spending time with you, more than I have enjoyed anything in a very long time. I am saying that when I am not here, I am thinking about being here, about you." The words hung between them, more honest than Warren had intended. He felt heat rise to his face, embarrassment at his own boldness. But Wren did not look angry or uncomfortable. Instead, she looked thoughtful, as if she were weighing something important. "Warren," she said slowly, "you know what people would say if they knew you were coming here, if they knew we were friends. I do not care what people say. You should. Reputations matter, especially on the frontier. If the people in Millbrook thought you were consorting with an orc, then they would be wrong. I am not consorting. I am visiting a friend. There is a difference." "Is there?" Wren's voice was soft, almost sad, "because it feels like more than that to me. And if it feels that way to me, it will feel that way to others." Warren's heart was pounding. Would it be so terrible if it was more? Wren turned away, her shoulders tense. "You do not know what you are saying. You have been kind to me, and I appreciate that more than you know. But this cannot go anywhere. I am an orc. You are a human. Those two things do not mix." "Why not?" "Because the world does not work that way." Wren's voice rose, frustration breaking through her usual calm. "Because even if we wanted it to, even if we were willing to face the prejudice and the hatred, there are laws against it in some places. Because your neighbors would turn on you, and you would lose everything you have built. Because I will not be the reason you destroy your life." Warren set down the basket and moved closer to Wren, close enough that he could reach out and touch her if he dared. "What if I think you are worth it?" Wren looked up at him, and he saw fear in her eyes, mixed with longing. "You do not know me well enough to say that." "Then let me know you better. Let me keep coming here, let me keep spending time with you, and at the end of the summer, if you still think I should walk away, I will. But give me a chance to prove that I mean what I say." For a long moment, Wren said nothing. Then, very slowly, she nodded. "Until the end of summer. But Warren, if you change your mind, if you realize this is a mistake, you need to tell me. Do not just disappear." "I will not disappear, I promise." They finished gathering berries in silence, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. Something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building for weeks. Warren felt lighter, as if a weight he had not known he was carrying had been lifted. Wren remained quiet, but when they walked back to the cottage, she walked closer to him than before, their shoulders occasionally brushing. That night, Warren lay in his own bed and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He thought about Wren's words, about the obstacles they would face, about the very real possibility that pursuing this would bring him nothing but trouble. But he also thought about the way she smiled when he said something that amused her, the gentleness in her hands when she tended her plants, the sound of her laughter, which was rare but precious. He had been alone for so long. He had convinced himself that he did not mind, that solitude was just part of life on the frontier. But now, having tasted the alternative, having felt what it was like to be seen and heard and valued by someone, he could not go back to the way things were. He would prove to Wren that he was serious. He would show her that what he felt was not some passing fancy, but something real and enduring. And maybe, if he was very lucky, she would feel the same way. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Warren's life. He continued to visit Wren regularly, and with each visit, the walls she had built around herself crumbled a little more. She began to share more of herself with him, small details that painted a fuller picture of who she was. She loved thunderstorms, though they frightened her chickens. She had a weakness for honey cakes, which she rarely made because she would eat the entire batch in one sitting. She sang sometimes when she worked, old orc songs in a language Warren did not understand but found beautiful anyway. In turn, Warren opened up to her in ways he had never opened up to anyone. He told her about the loneliness that sometimes felt like a physical ache, about the pressure he felt to be successful and independent when some days he just wanted someone to share a meal with. He told her about his fears, his doubts, his dreams for the future. And Wren listened to all of it without judgment, without trying to fix him or tell him what to do. One afternoon, they were sitting by the stream that ran behind Wren's cottage, their feet dangling in the cool water. It was a scorching day, the kind where even the shade felt oppressive, and they had abandoned their work in favor of finding relief by the water. Wren had brought a jug of mint tea, and they passed it back and forth, drinking straight from the container. "I have been thinking," Warren said, watching a fish dart through the shallows, "about what you said, about how people would react if they knew about us." "Us," Wren repeated as if testing the word. "Is there an us?" Warren looked at her and the truth came easily. "I think so. If you want there to be." Wren was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the water. "I want there to be," she said finally, "but wanting does not make it safe." "I know, but I have been thinking about that too. What if we did not hide? What if I was just honest about the fact that I have a friend who happens to be an orc, and I visit her because I enjoy her company? And when people ask if it is more than friendship, I will tell them the truth." Warren took a breath. "That I care about you. That I am courting you if you will let me." Wren turned to him, surprise clear on her face. "Courting me? Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes, actually. Warren, I am an orc. I have tusks, green skin. I am not what humans consider beautiful. I consider you beautiful." The words came out more forcefully than Warren intended, but he meant them. Wren was staring at him now, her eyes wide, and he pressed on before he could lose his courage. "I think you are beautiful. I think you are clever and strong and kind. I think about you constantly. When I am working on my farm, I find myself wishing you were there to talk to. When something happens, good or bad, you are the first person I want to tell. I have never felt this way about anyone, and I do not care if you are an orc or a human or a damned dragon. I just know that I do not want to lose you." Wren's eyes were shining, and Warren realized with shock that she was on the verge of tears. "You really mean that?" she whispered. "You are not just saying it. I really mean it." Wren reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and slightly rough from work. It was the first time they had really touched, not counting the accidental brushes and brief contacts that had happened before. Warren's breath caught at the contact, at the intimacy of it. "I care about you too," Wren said, her voice shaking slightly. "I have been trying not to because I knew it would only lead to pain, but I cannot help it. You make me feel like I matter, like I am more than just something to be feared or pitied. You are so much more than that." They sat there, hand in hand, for a long time. The water burbled over the rocks and birds called from the trees, and the world felt right in a way it rarely did. Warren thought about kissing her, wondered if she would let him, but decided to wait. This moment was perfect as it was. There would be time for more later. When they finally returned to the cottage, the air between them had changed again. It was charged now, heavy with possibility and promise. Wren made dinner, and Warren helped, and they moved around each other in the small kitchen space with an ease that spoke of growing familiarity. After they ate, Warren did not immediately prepare to leave. Instead, he stayed, sitting by the fire with Wren, talking about nothing and everything until the moon rose high and he knew he really had to go. "Will you come back in a few days?" Wren asked as she walked him to his horse. "I will come back tomorrow if you will have me." Wren smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Tomorrow is fine." Warren rode home in the darkness, guided by the light of the moon and a happiness that felt too large to contain. He was courting an orc woman, and she felt the same way about him, and the world had not ended. In fact, the world felt better than it ever had. Warren kept his word. He returned the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. His farm work suffered somewhat from the neglect, but he found he did not mind. The wheat would grow or it would not. The fences would stand or they would fall. Right now, the only thing that mattered was spending as much time as possible with Wren. They did not hide their growing relationship, but they did not advertise it either. Warren was careful about when he visited, usually timing his trips for mid-morning when the roads were less traveled. He did not mention Wren when he went to the village for supplies, though he carefully noted the things she might need and made sure to purchase extras for her. It was Marcus, the tavern keeper who had bought Warren's wheat, who finally brought up the subject. Warren had stopped in for a drink one evening, and Marcus poured him a generous measure of whiskey before leaning on the bar with a knowing look. "So," Marcus said, "I hear you have been spending a lot of time on the North Road lately." Warren's hand tightened on his glass. "Have you? Tom Fletcher saw you riding that way 3 times last week, said it looked like you were heading out past the Miller place." "Is there something wrong with the North Road?" Marcus held up his hands. "Nothing wrong with it. I am just curious what is out that way that has you making the trip so often. It is a long ride for nothing." Warren considered lying, deflecting, or simply refusing to answer. But he had told Wren he would not hide, and he meant it. "I have a friend who lives out there. I visit her." "Her?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Now that is interesting. Anyone I know? I doubt it. She keeps to herself mostly." "Must be some friend if you are willing to make that ride several times a week." Warren met Marcus's eyes steadily. "She is." There was a long pause while Marcus studied him. Then the tavern keeper nodded slowly. "Well, good for you then. Been saying for years you needed to find yourself a woman. Was starting to think you were content to be a bachelor forever." "So was I," Warren admitted. "Turns out I was wrong." Marcus poured him another drink and they moved on to other topics, but Warren could feel the weight of the conversation. Marcus was not a gossip by nature, but information had a way of spreading in small communities. It was only a matter of time before someone asked more pointed questions. The confrontation came sooner than Warren expected. He was in the general store 2 days later, purchasing flour and salt, when Peter Grant, a farmer from a neighboring property, approached him with a sour expression. "Lockhart," Grant said by way of greeting. "Got a question for you. Ask away." "Is it true you have been visiting that orc woman who lives up north?" Warren felt the other customers in the store go quiet, attention turning toward them. He set down the sack of flour carefully before answering. "It is true that I have been visiting a friend, yes. An orc friend. Yes." Grant's face reddened. "Are you out of your mind? Those creatures are dangerous. Everyone knows that. Wren is not dangerous. She is a healer and a gardener, and she has never done anything to harm anyone." "Wren," Grant repeated, as if the name itself were an insult. "You are on a first-name basis with her," Warren corrected, his voice hardening. "And yes, I am. Is there a problem?" "Damn right there is a problem. We have enough trouble with orcs raiding our farms and stealing livestock. Last thing we need is you making friends with them, giving them information about our homes and defenses. Wren has never raided anything. She lives peacefully, trades her remedies for supplies, and bothers no one. The only problem here is your prejudice." Grant took a step closer, his hands clenched into fists. "You calling me prejudiced, if the shoe fits?" For a moment Warren thought Grant might actually swing at him, but the storekeeper, a thin man named Albert, stepped between them, his hands raised. "Gentlemen, please. This is not the place for this discussion." Grant glared at Warren. "You better watch yourself, Lockhart. People are talking, and if you keep consorting with that creature you might find yourself unwelcome around here." "Is that a threat?" "It is a warning, from one neighbor to another." Grant turned and stalked out of the store, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Warren paid for his purchases and left, his mood considerably darker than when he had arrived. Albert had not said anything, but Warren had seen the discomfort in his eyes. Other customers had been openly staring. He rode straight to Wren's cottage, needing to see her, to remind himself why this was worth it. She was in her garden when he arrived, and she looked up with a smile that faded when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. Warren dismounted and told her about the encounter with Grant, about the accusations and the thinly veiled threats. Wren listened without interrupting, her face growing more and more closed off as he spoke. "I told you this would happen," she said when he finished. "People will not accept this." "I do not care what people accept, I care about you. Warren, this could get worse. Grant is not a good man. If he decides to make trouble for you or for me, let him try." Warren's voice was fierce. "I will not abandon you because some narrow-minded fool thinks he has a say in my life. You are important to me, more important than the good opinion of Peter Grant or anyone else." Wren looked at him, and he saw fear in her eyes, but also something else, gratitude maybe, or hope. "You would really face down your neighbors for me?" "I would face down the whole damn village if I had to." Wren stepped closer and took his hands, holding them tightly. "I do not want you to have to, but thank you for standing up for me. No one has ever done that before." "Then people are fools." Warren pulled her into an embrace, holding her close. She stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed against him, her arms coming up to wrap around his waist. She fit perfectly against him, he thought, as if they were made to stand like this. They stayed that way for a long time, drawing strength from each other. Warren breathed in the scent of her hair, which smelled like the herbs she worked with, and felt his anger slowly drain away. As long as they had each other, the rest of the world could go hang. But the world, as it turned out, was not content to be ignored. 3 nights later, Warren woke to the smell of smoke. He stumbled out of bed, his mind foggy with sleep, and ran to the window. In the distance, he could see an orange glow against the night sky. Fire. And it was coming from the direction of Wren's cottage. Warren did not stop to think. He pulled on his boots and coat, ran to the barn, and saddled his horse with shaking hands. The ride to Wren's cottage felt like it took hours, though it could not have been more than 40 minutes. Every moment, he expected to see flames engulfing the forest, to arrive too late. When he finally reached the cottage, his heart lurched. The shed was on fire, flames leaping into the night sky. Wren was there, frantically throwing buckets of water on the blaze, but it was spreading too fast. Warren leaped from his horse and ran to help. "Warren!" Wren's face was streaked with soot and tears. "My chickens are in there, the shed." She kept some of her chickens in the shed at night, away from predators. Warren did not hesitate. He grabbed a blanket, dunked it in the water trough, and wrapped it around himself. Then he ran into the burning building. The heat was overwhelming and the smoke choked him, but he pushed forward, feeling his way in the darkness. He could hear the panic squawking of chickens, and he followed the sound until his hands found the wire cage where Wren kept them. He grabbed the cage, ignoring the heat searing his palms, and stumbled back toward the door. Fresh air hit him like a blessing, and he gulped it down, coughing. Wren was there, taking the cage from him, her hands as gentle with the terrified birds as they would have been with him. Warren bent over, trying to catch his breath, and felt Wren's hand on his back. "Are you hurt?" she asked urgently. "I am fine. The cottage is safe. The fire has not spread. But Warren, look." She pointed to the side of the shed, where the flames were dying down now that the structure had mostly collapsed. Painted on the stone wall of the cottage, visible in the flickering light, were words in crude white paint: "Go home, Orc." Warren felt a cold fury settle over him. This was not an accident. Someone had come here, had deliberately set fire to Wren's property, had tried to drive her away, and he had a pretty good idea who. "Stay here," he said. "I am going to. You are not going to do anything except help me put out the rest of this fire before it spreads." Wren's voice was firm. "We can deal with whoever did this later." She was right. They spent the next hour making sure every ember was extinguished, hauling water from the well until Warren's arms ached and his lungs burned from the smoke. By the time they were finished, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The shed was a total loss, reduced to charred beams and ash. Wren's chickens huddled in the cage, traumatized but alive. Warren looked at Wren and saw that she was shaking. He pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest, her body racked with silent sobs. He held her, murmuring nonsense words of comfort, stroking her hair. "I am so sorry," he said. "This is my fault. If I had not been visiting you, if people did not know, do not." Wren pulled back, her amber eyes fierce despite the tears. "Do not you dare take responsibility for someone else's hatred. You did nothing wrong. They did. But they did this because of me, because I would not stay away from you. They did this because they are cruel and small-minded. That is not your fault." Wren wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a smear of soot across her face. "But Warren, maybe they are right. Maybe I should leave." "No." The word came out harder than Warren intended. "You are not leaving. This is your home. A home that someone just tried to burn down. Then we will make it safe. I will talk to the constable, report what happened. Someone has to answer for this." Wren laughed bitterly. "You think the constable will care that an orc's shed was burned? He will probably thank whoever did it. You do not know that. I know enough." Warren looked at the ruined shed, at the hateful words painted on the cottage wall, and felt helpless. Wren was probably right. In the eyes of the law, she was barely a person. No one would investigate this crime, and even if they did, no one would be punished. "Then I will stay here," he said. "At least for a while. Keep watch. If they come back when they come back," Wren corrected. "People like this do not stop after one warning. Then I will be here to meet them." They moved through the morning in a daze, cleaning up what they could, salvaging what little had survived the fire. Warren's hands were blistered from the heat, and his throat was raw from the smoke, but he worked without complaint. Wren was quiet, her usual composure shattered. She moved mechanically, and Warren could see her pulling back into herself, retreating to that place of isolation where she had lived before he came into her life. He could not let that happen. He would not. "Wren," he said, catching her hand as she passed. "Look at me." She stopped, her eyes downcast. "Look at me," he repeated, more gently this time. Slowly, she raised her eyes to his. "We are going to get through this," Warren said. "Together. I do not care how many sheds they burn or how many threats they make. I am not leaving you, and you are not leaving me. Do you understand, Warren? You could die. If they come back, if they bring weapons, then I will fight. But I will not abandon you. That is not negotiable." Wren searched his face, and whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because some of the tension left her shoulders. "You are a stubborn man. I have been told that before." She managed a small smile, the first he had seen since he arrived. "I suppose I am stuck with you then. You are absolutely stuck with me." Warren spent the next 2 nights at Wren's cottage, sleeping on the floor by the door with a loaded rifle across his lap. Nothing happened. No one came. But the tension was there, a constant weight in the air. Wren barely slept, and when she did, she woke at the slightest sound. On the 3rd day, Warren rode back to his own farm to check on things and gather supplies. He found his fields undisturbed, his barn intact. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by guilt. His property was safe while Wren's had been attacked. The unfairness of it made him want to scream. He was loading a wagon with food and blankets when Marcus rode up on a bay mare. The tavern keeper dismounted and approached cautiously, his expression troubled. "Warren," he said, "I heard about what happened to your friend. Is she all right?" "She will be." Warren did not stop working. "Assuming no one tries anything else. I am sorry, truly. I do not hold with that kind of behavior, and I want you to know that." Warren paused, looking at Marcus. "Do you know who did it?" Marcus hesitated. "I have heard rumors, nothing I can prove, but Warren, you need to be careful. There are people in town who are angry about your association with that orc woman. They see it as a betrayal. A betrayal of what? Of your own kind. Of the community." Marcus held up a hand as Warren opened his mouth to argue. "I am not saying I agree, I am just telling you how people see it. People are idiots, maybe, but idiots can be dangerous when they get riled up." Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. "Peter Grant has been drinking at the tavern almost every night. He has been talking about how something needs to be done about the orc problem. He has a few followers, young men mostly, who like the sound of his voice. Grant, Warren should have known. He set the fire. I do not know that for certain, but if I were you, I would watch out for him, and for yourself. If you keep defending her, you will make enemies." "I already have enemies, apparently." Marcus sighed. "Just think about it. Is this woman really worth throwing away everything you have?" Warren looked Marcus in the eye. "Yes, she is." Marcus shook his head, but there was something like respect in his expression. "You are a braver man than I am, Warren Lockhart, or a more foolish one. I have not decided which." After Marcus left, Warren finished loading the wagon and drove it back to Wren's cottage. She helped him unload, and together they began the work of rebuilding. Warren could not replace the shed, not quickly, but he could make temporary repairs, secure the property, improve the defenses. He built a new fence with sharp stakes, tall enough to keep out intruders. He reinforced the shutters on the cottage windows. He showed Wren how to load and fire his spare rifle, though she handled the weapon awkwardly. "I do not like guns," she admitted, "but I suppose I should learn. I hope you never have to use it, but I will feel better knowing you can defend yourself if I am not here." Wren set the rifle aside and touched his face, her fingers gentle on his soot-stained cheek. "You have done so much for me, more than I could ever repay." "You do not need to repay me. I am doing this because I want to. Because he stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Because you what?" Wren's voice was soft, encouraging. Warren took a breath. "Because I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Wren's eyes went wide, and for a moment Warren feared he had gone too far, said too much too soon. But then Wren smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face. "I love you too," she said. "I have been trying not to, but I cannot help it. You have become the most important person in my life." Warren pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was their first kiss, and it was everything he had hoped for and more. Her lips were soft despite the tusks, her mouth warm and welcoming. She tasted like the mint tea she drank constantly, and when she wrapped her arms around his neck, Warren felt like he could fly. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Wren laughed, a sound of pure joy, and pressed her forehead to his. "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone," she said. "Especially not a human." "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone," Warren echoed. "Especially not an orc." They laughed together, and for a moment, the fear and the tension fell away. It was just the two of them, holding each other, in love and happy despite the world's attempts to keep them apart. But the world was not done with them yet. A week passed without incident. Warren split his time between his farm and Wren's cottage, always returning to her in the evening. They fell into a comfortable domesticity, cooking together, working together, sleeping in the same bed. Wren was shy at first about that last part, but Warren was patient, and she gradually relaxed. They did not consummate their relationship, not yet. There was no rush. Just being together was enough. Then, on a humid evening when the air was thick with the promise of rain, Peter Grant came to Warren's farm. Warren was in the barn, tending to his horses, when he heard the sound of multiple riders approaching. He stepped outside and counted 5 men on horseback, Grant at the front. They were all armed, rifles slung across their saddles, and their faces were hard. "Grant," Warren said evenly. "What can I do for you?" Grant dismounted, and the other men followed suit. "We need to talk, Lockhart, about your Ork. Warren's hand tightened on the pitchfork he was holding. "Watch your mouth." "Or what? You will defend her honor," Grant laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "She is a monster, Lockhart, and you have been consorting with her like she is a real woman. It is disgusting. What Wren and I do is none of your business. It is our business when you make us all look bad. It is our business when you give the orcs ideas about mingling with humans. They need to know their place, and you are undermining that." "Their place?" Warren's voice was dangerously quiet. "And where is that exactly? Away from us. Back in the mountains where they belong, or dead. Either works for me." Warren moved forward, raising the pitchfork. "Get off my property." "Now." Grant's hand dropped to the knife at his belt. "Or what? You going to fight all 5 of us, if I have to?" For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of the other men, a young farmer named Tom Fletcher, spoke up. "Peter, maybe we should just go. We said what we came to say." "We are not done." Grant's eyes were fixed on Warren. "I want you to promise you will stop seeing that creature. End whatever sick relationship you have with her, and we will leave you alone." "I will not make that promise. Not now, not ever." Grant's face twisted with rage. "Then you leave us no choice. Boys, teach him a lesson." The men moved forward, and Warren braced himself. He was a good fighter, had learned to handle himself growing up on the frontier, but he was outnumbered. Still, he would not go down without a fight. The first man reached him, and Warren swung the pitchfork. The man dodged, but Warren followed through with a punch that connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling. Then the others were on him, fists and boots flying. Warren fought back hard, landing as many hits as he took, but there were too many of them. He ended up on the ground, curled up to protect his vital organs while they kicked him. He tasted blood, felt ribs crack, and thought dimly that this might be how he died. Then he heard a new voice, sharp and authoritative. "Stop! Stop right now, or I will shoot." The kicking ceased. Warren blinked blood out of his eyes and looked up to see Wren standing in his yard, the rifle he had given her raised to her shoulder. Her hands were steady, and her aim was fixed on Peter Grant. "You," Grant said, his voice dripping with contempt, "put that down before you hurt yourself." "I know how to use this," Wren said calmly, "and I will shoot you if you touch him again. You will hang for it, maybe. But you will be dead." Wren's finger moved to the trigger. "Is that worth it?" Grant stared at her, clearly trying to decide if she was bluffing. Whatever he saw in her face must have convinced him she was not, because he stepped back, raising his hands. "This is not over," he said. "You hear me, Lockhart? This is not over." "Get out," Warren managed to croak, "before she changes her mind about shooting you." Grant and his men mounted their horses and rode off, leaving Warren lying in the dirt. As soon as they were out of sight, Wren dropped the rifle and ran to him, falling to her knees beside him. "Warren! Oh gods, Warren, are you all right?" "I have been better." Warren tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his side. Broken ribs, definitely. Possibly worse. Wren helped him up carefully, supporting most of his weight. Together they made their way into the house, where she laid him down on his bed. Then she went into full healer mode, examining him with gentle but thorough hands, checking for serious injuries. "You need a doctor," she said. "No doctor, they will ask questions. Warren, you could have internal bleeding." I will be fine, just bruised and battered, nothing time would not heal. He caught her hand. How did you know to come? I had a feeling something was wrong. I rode over to check on you and heard the shouting. Wren's voice shook. When I saw them hurting you, I wanted to kill them. I have never wanted to hurt anyone before, but I wanted to kill them for touching you. I am glad you did not. You were right. They would have hanged you. I do not care. You are worth it. Warren pulled her down to kiss him, ignoring the pain it caused. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you so much. I love you too. Which is why you are going to let me take care of you, and you are not going to argue about it. Wren stayed with Warren through the night, tending his injuries, forcing him to drink water and eat despite his protests that he was not hungry. She made poultices from herbs she kept in her bag, applied them to his worst bruises, and wrapped his ribs tightly. By morning, Warren was feeling marginally better, though every movement still hurt. I need to go to the constable, he said. Report what happened. And say what? That 5 respected farmers beat you because you were consorting with an orc. They will take their side. Maybe, but I have to try. Wren sighed but helped him dress. Together they rode into Millbrook, a journey that took twice as long as usual because Warren could barely sit upright in the saddle. People stared as they passed, and Warren heard the whispers, the shocked exclamations. Let them stare. Let them whisper. He was done hiding. The constable's office was a small building near the center of town. Constable Martin was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a graying beard and a perpetual look of skepticism. He listened to Warren's story without interrupting, his expression giving nothing away. So you are saying Peter Grant and 4 other men came to your property and attacked you, Martin said when Warren finished, and you want me to arrest them? That is exactly what I am saying. Martin leaned back in his chair. And why do you think they did this? Because I have been visiting Wren. Because I am in a relationship with her and they do not approve. Martin's eyes flicked to Wren, who was standing by the door, then back to Warren. A relationship with an orc. Yes. And you think that is wise? Warren's temper flared. Whether it is wise or not is irrelevant. I was attacked on my own property. That is a crime. Are you going to do anything about it or not? Martin was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. I will talk to Grant, see what he has to say. That is it. You will talk to him. What do you want me to do, Lockhart? Arrest 5 men on your word alone? I need evidence, witnesses. I am a witness, Wren said quietly. I saw them. Martin looked at her, and Warren saw the dismissal in his eyes. No offense, miss, but your testimony would not hold up, not in this matter. Because I am an orc. Because you are involved. It is your word and his against theirs. That is not enough. Warren stood, ignoring the pain in his ribs. So you are telling me there is nothing you can do, that they can attack me with impunity as long as they have numbers on their side? I am telling you to be smart. If you are having trouble with your neighbors, maybe it is because you are doing something that upsets them. Maybe you should think about that. Maybe they should think about minding their own business. Warren turned and walked out, Wren following. They mounted their horses and rode back to Warren's farm in silence. By the time they arrived, Warren was exhausted and in agony, but also burning with righteous anger. He will not help, Warren said as Wren helped him down from his horse. None of them will. We are on our own. I know. Wren's voice was sad but unsurprised. I told you this is how it would be. Then we will protect ourselves. I will fortify my farm, same as I did your cottage, and I will not give Grant another chance to catch me off guard. Warren, maybe it is time to accept that this is not going to work. We love each other, but if being together means you are constantly in danger, no. Warren gripped her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Do not even think about it. I am not giving you up. Not for Peter Grant, not for the constable, not for anyone. You are mine and I am yours, and that is the end of it. Wren's eyes filled with tears. I do not want you to get hurt because of me. I am already hurt, but I will heal, and when I do, we are going to figure out how to make this work, together." Wren nodded, and Warren pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of his injuries. They stood there in the yard, holding each other while the sun climbed higher in the sky. The attack changed things. Warren knew he could not keep living the way he had been, splitting his time between his farm and Wren's cottage. It was not safe for either of them. After much discussion, they decided that Wren would move to Warren's farm. It was larger, easier to defend, and Warren could protect her better if she was there with him. Wren was reluctant at first, worried about propriety and what people would say. But Warren pointed out that people were already saying plenty, and at least this way they would be saying it about something true. Besides, he wanted Wren there. He wanted to wake up next to her every morning and fall asleep beside her every night. He wanted to build a life with her, and that could not happen if they were living in separate places. So they moved Wren's belongings, what few she had, to Warren's farm. Her chickens joined his in the coop. Her herbs were transplanted to a corner of his garden. Her books found a place on his shelves. Slowly, the farm began to feel like their farm rather than just his. The people of Millbrook reacted about as well as could be expected, which was to say, poorly. Warren found himself increasingly isolated. Merchants who had once greeted him warmly now served him with cold efficiency. Neighbors who had been friendly now avoided him. He was not invited to the harvest festival that fall, and when he showed up at church one Sunday, the pastor gave him a sermon about the dangers of straying from God's path that was clearly directed at him. But Warren did not care. He had Wren, and that was enough. She made his house feel like a home. She cooked meals that were better than anything he had ever made for himself. She tended the garden with skill and care, growing vegetables he had never even heard of. She sang while she worked, those old orc songs that he was slowly learning the meaning of. And at night, she lay beside him, her head on his chest, and they talked about everything and nothing until sleep claimed them. They consummated their relationship on a cool autumn evening, 2 months after Wren had moved in. It was gentle and unhurried, full of whispered words and soft touches. Warren had been nervous, unsure if the physical differences between them would matter, but they did not. Wren fit against him perfectly, her body responding to his with an eagerness that matched his own. Afterward they lay tangled together, sweat cooling on their skin, and Warren thought that he had never been happier. "I want to marry you," he said suddenly. Wren propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with surprise. "What? I want to marry you, make this official. I want everyone to know that you are my wife. Warren, we cannot get married. There is no priest who would perform the ceremony. Then we will do it ourselves, a hand fasting like your people do, or we will just declare ourselves married and live as husband and wife. I do not care about the legalities, I care about the commitment." Wren was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "Are you sure? This is a big step." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Wren smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. "Then yes. I will marry you, Warren Lockhart. However we do it, wherever we do it, my answer is yes." They held their wedding on the farm, just the two of them. There were no guests, no officiant, no legal documents, but it felt real anyway. They stood in the garden at sunset, holding hands, and spoke vows they had written themselves. Warren promised to love Wren for the rest of his days, to protect her and provide for her, to be her partner in all things. Wren promised the same, her voice steady and sure. They exchanged simple bands Warren had made from braided wire, since he could not afford proper rings and doubted any jeweler would sell them to him anyway. When they were done, Warren kissed his wife, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They spent that winter happy and isolated. Snow fell heavily, blanketing the farm and making travel difficult. Warren did not mind. It gave them time together, time to learn each other's rhythms and habits, time to simply be. They read by the fire, played cards, made love, and planned for the spring planting. Occasionally, Warren made the trip into town for supplies, but he went less and less frequently as the winter wore on. He had no desire to deal with the hostility that greeted him there. Instead, he focused on his farm and his wife, and let the rest of the world fade into the background. It was in late winter, when the snow was beginning to melt and the first hints of spring were appearing, that Wren told him she was pregnant. Warren was in the barn, mucking out stalls when Wren found him. She stood in the doorway, backlit by the pale winter sun, and there was something in her expression that made him set down his pitchfork immediately. "What is wrong?" he asked. "Nothing is wrong. At least I do not think it is." Wren stepped forward, taking his hands in hers. "Warren, I am with child." For a moment, Warren was not sure he had heard correctly. Then the words sank in, and a wave of emotion hit him so hard he nearly staggered. Joy, fear, excitement, worry, all mixed together into something overwhelming. "A baby," he said stupidly. "We are having a baby." "We are." Wren's smile was tentative, as if she was not sure how he would react. "Are you happy?" "Happy, I am." Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I am terrified, but yes, I am happy. Gods, Wren, we are going to be parents. We are." They stood there in the barn, holding each other, and Warren felt the weight of it settle on him. A child. His and Wren's child. A half-orc baby who would face a world that was hostile to its very existence. The thought was sobering. "We can do this," he said, as much to himself as to Wren. "We can raise a child together. We can keep them safe. We will have to. There is no other choice now." Warren pulled back to look at her, taking in her face, which already seemed to glow with something new. "I love you," he said, "and I will love our child. No matter what happens, we are a family now." "A family," Wren repeated, and there were tears in her eyes. "I never thought I would have that." "Well, you have it now. You are stuck with me and stuck with this baby." Wren laughed, a sound of pure joy, and kissed him. Warren kissed her back, pouring all his love and hope and determination into it. They would make this work. They had to. The pregnancy was not easy. Wren suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Warren often woke to find her bent over a bucket, retching up whatever she had managed to eat the day before. He did what he could to help, bringing her ginger tea and dry toast, rubbing her back when the nausea was particularly bad. But mostly he felt helpless, wishing there was more he could do. As the months passed and Wren's belly swelled, Warren found himself becoming increasingly protective. He took over all the heavy chores, refusing to let Wren lift anything or strain herself. She protested at first, insisting she was not fragile, but eventually gave in when she realized how much it meant to him. The people of Millbrook learned about the pregnancy, of course. It was impossible to keep such things secret in a small community. The reaction was about what Warren expected. Some people were horrified, muttering about abominations and unholy unions. Others were simply disgusted. A very few, kept their opinions to themselves and treated Warren with the same distant courtesy they always had. Warren tried not to let it bother him, but it was hard. He worried about his child growing up in a place where they would be hated just for existing. He worried about Wren, who was already isolated and would only become more so as a mother to a half-orc child. He worried about whether he had made a terrible mistake, dragging her into a life that would bring her nothing but pain. But then he would see Wren talking to her belly, singing to the baby, and his doubts would fade. She was happy. She was excited. And Warren would be damned if he let the world's cruelty ruin that for her. In late spring, Wren went into labor. It happened in the middle of the night, Wren waking Warren with a gasp and a grip on his arm that was almost painful. "It is time," she said, her voice tight with pain. Warren was out of bed immediately, fumbling to light a lantern. He had prepared for this, had gathered supplies and made plans, but now that the moment was here, his mind was blank with panic. "What do you need?" he asked. "Tell me what to do. Water, clean linens, and stay calm." Wren managed a smile despite the pain. "One of us has to." Warren did as she instructed, boiling water, gathering the linens they had set aside, making sure everything was ready. Wren had explained the process to him, had told him what to expect, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. The hours stretched on, Wren laboring through contractions that seemed to tear through her. Warren held her hand, wiped sweat from her face, and felt more terrified than he had ever been in his life. Just before dawn, their son was born. Warren caught the baby as it emerged, a tiny, squalling thing covered in blood and fluid. He stared at it in wonder, this perfect little person that he and Wren had created together. The baby had Wren's green skin, though lighter, and Warren's eyes. There were no tusks yet, though Wren said they would come in later. "A boy," Warren said, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a son." Wren held out her arms and Warren carefully placed the baby on her chest. She looked down at him with such love that Warren felt his heart might burst. This was his family, his wife and his son. Nothing else mattered. They named the boy Nathaniel after Warren's father. He was a good baby, quiet and content, and Warren fell in love with him instantly. Those first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant worry, but also profound joy. Warren had never experienced anything like it, the overwhelming need to protect this tiny, helpless creature. The fierce pride he felt whenever Nathaniel opened his eyes or curled his little fingers around Warren's thumb. Wren was a natural mother, patient and gentle even when she was exhausted. She nursed Nathaniel, sang to him, held him when he cried. And when Warren felt overwhelmed, which was often, she was there to reassure him that he was doing fine, that they were doing fine together. The world, however, remained as hostile as ever. When Nathaniel was 3 months old, Warren made the mistake of bringing him to the market in Millbrook. He had needed supplies, and Wren had been tired, so he had bundled Nathaniel up and taken him along. The reaction was immediate and ugly. People stared. Women clutched their children closer, as if Nathaniel were a danger. Men muttered under their breath, words like half-breed and abomination carrying clearly to Warren's ears. One woman actually spat at his feet as he passed. Warren bought what he needed quickly and left, his hands shaking with anger. Nathaniel, oblivious to the hatred around him, slept peacefully against Warren's chest. By the time Warren got home, he had made a decision. "We are leaving," he told Wren. "We cannot raise Nathaniel here. It is not safe, and it is not fair to him." Wren looked up from the pot she was stirring, surprise on her face. "Leave? And go where?" "Farther west. There are new settlements out there, places where people are too busy surviving to care about who you are or what you look like. We could start fresh, build a new life. Warren, that would mean giving up your farm, everything you have worked for. I do not care. None of it means anything if my family is not safe and happy." Warren moved closer, taking her free hand. "I want Nathaniel to grow up somewhere he can run and play without people looking at him like he is a monster. I want you to be able to walk into a town and not face hatred. I want us to be able to live without constantly looking over our shoulders." Wren set down the spoon, her eyes shining with tears. "Are you sure? This is a huge decision." "I am sure. We should have done this months ago. I was just being stubborn, thinking I could change people's minds, but I cannot. So we will go somewhere else and find people who are already open-minded. Or at least people who are too far from civilization to have picked up all the prejudices. Wren threw her arms around him, and Warren held her close, feeling Nathaniel squirm between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being willing to do this for us. You are my family. I would do anything for you." They spent the next 2 months preparing to leave. Warren sold his farm to a land speculator for less than it was worth, but he did not care. The money would be enough to get them started somewhere new. He bought a sturdy wagon, 2 good horses, and supplies for the journey west. They packed everything they owned, which was not much, and said goodbye to the only home Warren had ever known. On their last night, Warren stood in the doorway of the farmhouse and looked around at the empty rooms. He felt a pang of sadness, remembering all the years he had spent here, the hard work and the small victories. But then he heard Wren singing to Nathaniel in the wagon outside, and the sadness faded. This was not his home anymore. His home was wherever Wren and Nathaniel were. The journey west was long and difficult, but Warren did not regret it for a moment. They traveled for weeks, following rough roads and wagon trails, camping under the stars. Nathaniel seemed to enjoy the adventure, gurgling happily as the wagon bounced along. Wren pointed out plants and animals to him, already beginning his education in the natural world. They passed through several small towns and settlements, and Warren watched carefully to gauge the reactions of the people they met. Some places were no better than Millbrook, the same suspicious stares and whispered comments, but others were different. In one frontier town, a woman came up to them at the market and cooed over Nathaniel, calling him adorable and asking if she could hold him. Wren had been so surprised she had almost said no, but then she handed over their son, and the woman had cuddled him without a hint of disgust or fear. That town was not right for them either, too crowded and still too close to the kind of civilization that bred intolerance. But it gave Warren hope that such places existed. They finally settled in a small valley nestled between 2 mountain ranges, far enough from any established town that they would be left alone, but close enough to a trading post that they could get supplies when needed. The land was rich and fertile, with a stream running through it and forests all around. It was perfect. Warren built them a cabin, working from dawn to dusk to get it finished before the first snow. Wren helped where she could, and when Nathaniel was old enough, he toddled around the construction site, chattering in the mix of human and orcish words that was becoming his language. Other families began to settle in the valley over the next year, drawn by the same promise of fresh starts and freedom. Some of them were human, some were half-orcs like Nathaniel, and a few were full-blooded orcs. They formed a loose community, helping each other with harvests and barn raisings, trading goods and skills. For the first time in years, Warren felt like he was part of something, like he belonged. Wren blossomed in this new environment. She no longer walked with her shoulders hunched, no longer flinched when strangers approached. She made friends, other women who valued her knowledge of herbs and healing, who invited her to quilting bees and harvest celebrations. She laughed more, smiled more, and Warren fell in love with her all over again. Nathaniel grew into a bright, energetic child. He had his mother's green skin and his father's stubbornness, and he was fearless to the point of recklessness. He climbed trees too high, waded into the stream too deep, and once tried to pet a bear cub until Warren scooped him up and ran. But he was also kind and curious, always asking questions, always wanting to help. When Nathaniel was 3, Wren gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Nora. She had Warren's coloring but Wren's features, and she was quieter than her brother, content to sit and watch the world with solemn eyes. Warren adored her instantly, and Nathaniel was thrilled to have a little sister, though he did not understand why she could not play with him right away. Life in the valley was not always easy. There were harsh winters and poor harvests, illnesses and injuries. But they faced it all together, Warren and Wren and their growing family. They built a life that was full and rich, surrounded by people who accepted them for who they were. Years passed. Nathaniel learned to read and write, taught by Wren in their small cabin. Nora grew into a sweet, thoughtful child who loved helping her mother in the garden. Warren's farm prospered, producing enough to feed his family and trade for the things they needed. He added onto the cabin, giving the children their own room, building a proper barn and workshop. On warm summer evenings, Warren and Wren would sit on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Nathaniel would chase fireflies while Nora tried to catch them in her cupped hands. And Warren would reach over and take Wren's hand, marveling at how far they had come from that stormy night when he had knocked on her door. "Do you ever regret it?" Wren asked one such evening, her voice quiet. "Regret what? All of this? Leaving your home, facing everything we faced? Would you do it differently if you could?" Warren turned to look at her, this woman he had loved through storms and fires and the hatred of the world. She was older now, fine lines around her eyes, silver threads in her dark hair. But she was still beautiful to him, still the person he wanted to spend every moment with. "Not for a second," he said. "Every hardship was worth it. Every sacrifice led us here, to this life, to our family. I would do it all again, exactly the same way, because it brought me to you." Wren smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I love you, Warren Lockhart. I love you, Wren Lockhart." They sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink while their children played and laughed. And Warren thought that this, right here, was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without its challenges, but real and true and worth fighting for. He had opened his door to a stranger in a storm all those years ago, never imagining where that simple act of kindness would lead. But he would not change a thing. Because that storm had brought him Wren, and Wren had brought him home. They sat together, watching the stars come out one by one, and Warren squeezed his wife's hand, grateful for every moment they had been given and eager for all the moments still to come.